Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to do a recap of week 1 Garb reads. So I was initially going to do a vlog situation where I vlogged as I read, but looking back at my footage, I didn't feel like it quite captured what I was reading. So I think for this week I'm just going to do a recap, and then on moving forward I'll do more of the vlog thing. So just to recap, week 1's theme is sex and violence, trash that goes out of its way to be explicit. So I asked a friend of mine who is studying literature and architecture and stuff like that for recommendations, not specific to this theme, but it turned out that the ones he gave me were perfect for week 1. So the first book I read was Philosophy of the Boudoir by Marquis de Sade, which was published in 1975. No, sorry, take it back. 1795. Okay, there we go. So here's the plot of this book. Philosophy of the Boudoir follows 3 aristocrats as they indoctrinate the 15-year-old Eugénie de Mestival in the principles of the most outrageous libertinism. So I'm going to need to give you some context on this author because it's pretty interesting. Donatien Alphonse François, or Marquis de Sade, who was born in 1740 and died in 1814, was a French aristocrat, revolutionary politician, philosopher, and writer, famous for his libertine sexuality and lifestyle. His works include novels, short stories, plays, dialogues, and political tracts. So, Philosophy in the Boudoir is a dialogue. In his lifetime, some were published under his own name, while others appeared anonymously and Sade denied being their author. He is best known for the erotic works, which combine philosophical discourse with pornography, depicting sexual fantasies with an emphasis on violence, criminality, and blasphemy against the Catholic Church. He was a proponent of extreme freedom, unrestrained by morality, religion, or law. Based on that little tiny biography I gave you, I hope you can guess what kind of book this was. So obviously, first of all, heads up, there's adults having sex with underage kids, and not only with Eugénie, but as they're talking in their discourse, they're referencing themselves having sex with even younger people. So if that bothers you, I wouldn't read this book. But anyway, I could give a million other trigger warnings for this one because, hold on, I have my little reading notebook. Does anyone else have a reading notebook, by the way? Or like a reading journal or something? Okay. Like the synopsis says, it's essentially 3 aristocrats. So there's a knight, there's Delmancé, and there's Mademoiselle de Saint-Ange, or Mrs. of Saint Angel, and Eugénie, who is a 15-year-old girl, and essentially Mrs. of Saint Angel offers Eugénie's father to teach her the art of libertinism. So her father is also a libertinist, while her mother is a very religious person who's more, she's kind of against it. She's like, you know, I more wanting to teach her virtue of religion, etc., whatever. Everyone has sex with everyone, basically, is the pornographical aspect of this book. They teach Eugénie how to have sex, but they also teach her about, like, the mechanics of the female body and the male body. As pornographical as this book is, it's also very, like, I don't want to say instructive, but, like, kind of, you know what I mean? And they also, so essentially it's like they all 4 like end up in a room and they like have sex, and then they stop and like talk, discuss topics, whatever. And so they talk about different subjects such as sexuality, religion, the meaning of virtue. There's a lot of discussion around Christian, specifically Catholic values. Delmancé, one of the 3 teachers, was introduced as being like the most atheist guy ever, and it shows, like, not to say he craps on religion, but kind of, but it's like in a thought out way. Very opinionated, but justified opinions. Yeah, so I thought it was really well written. It was really interesting. I gave it a 3.5 on Goodreads. Some discussion themes I noted in this book, like the main themes are libertinism, women's freedoms. Oh, this is another theme I thought was very interesting, which was sexual expectations of women and sexual expectations of men. I read a review, I can't remember if it was on Goodreads or not. They said that essentially this book, what makes it special, and I actually really agree, is that it seems shocking, but what it really does at face value is like, or like when you take a step back and think about it, what it does is it takes expectations of women around sexuality and sex, and like it puts it at the same level of what society expects of men in sex, which is why it seems so shocking, because there is that kind of like gap. And when you read the book, at first it is pretty shocking, but then you think like, oh, aside from the fact that adults are having sex with a child. This book, like many other, has to be read with some critical thinking in mind. I think, okay, I'm going to get back to the whole critical thinking situation, but other themes that are discussed in here are religion, specifically Catholicism, but I think more so Christianity in general. There's murder, sodomy, contraception, there's incest, and another really interesting theme is natural given human rights versus societally imposed human rights, and the difference between the two, and it's really interesting. This book is really well written. I really enjoyed reading it, and yeah. So the next book I read is Venus in Furs, whose author is literally the big daddy of masochism, and that is Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. So, as the name implies, masochism, you get where I'm going with this? This is the author who coined the term masochism through his books, or texts or writings. I'm not saying it didn't exist before him, it's just wasn't called masochism. Maybe it's just regular sex, I don't know. But yeah, he coined the term through his writings, so that's kind of the theme of his books. So I read Venus in Furs, and the plot to that book is, Severin is a young Galician nobleman with a secret. He can only love a woman with a ruthless heart, who will rain her whip upon him in a shower of bloody kisses. When Severin meets Wanda, the wealthy and beautiful widow living in the apartment downstairs, he wonders if she might be the one to help him realize his darkest desires. But Wanda is better than she ever dreamed possible in domination, and soon Severin realizes he's powerless to escape what he has begun. So that's the plot to Venus in Furs. To be honest, I ended up giving it more of a 2.5 out of 5, because essentially what happens in this book is that Severin and Wanda meet, and they kind of have this thing going on where he asks, they sexually dominate each other, and it's pretty good. The first half of the book I really enjoyed. There is this masochism that's going on between the two, where it's kind of like purely sexual in nature, and then after a while Severin starts to fall in love with her. She says she'll only marry him like after a year of this thing going on, but he wants to marry her like right now because he loves her so much. He's like infatuated, and so they end up going to Florence, and she makes him sign a contract to where he's her slave, like he's her sexual slave, and like she can do whatever she wants with him. So she falls in love with this other guy. She realizes that she can be his dominated, and her dominator. I don't know why the words are slipping from my head, but anyway, and so she there's this kind of like weird love triangle energy going on for a while, and eventually Severin kind of gets his heart broken when he realizes that there's this love triangle and that she's not coming to pleasure him sexually. So I think that was an interesting element to add to the whole masochistic idea of psychological torture. In terms of physical torture, though, I felt like it was kind of basic because there's only like being chained up and whipped, which in the grand spectrum of masochism, I think it's pretty basic, but you know. So both books I ended up reading ended up being more sexual than violent than what I was hoping for. But that's okay. They were both really good and I really enjoyed reading them both. And actually, were it not for this theme and my friend's recommendations, I don't think I would have read these books. Even if I had read them, I don't think I would have read them back to back. However, I think reading these two books together was really interesting because of the whole sexual behavior in society theme, and like how acceptable is it to feel like you have these sexual desires type of situation. They were both really interesting. I think the core idea behind these two books is just like an inherent, like, seeking this feeling of total freedom in, like, within yourself, you know. It's kind of reminiscent to me of Story of the Eye by Georges Bataille, where that's another very sexual book if you're looking for, like, intellectually inclined pornography. Story of the Eye by Georges Bataille, definitely recommend it, but the inherent, like, message I think behind it is just like total freedom within sexual freedom. Whereas in one book, in The Philosophy of the Boudoir, it's very much about letting women be free of their societal expectations sexually and also not sexually. They kind of discuss it on multiple levels. And then in The Venus in Furs, it's very much about having a woman as the dominatrix. That's the word I was looking for, dominatrix. And so, which is more like the opposite of the traditional role of women in society. So Netflix kind of knows me, and it recommended this documentary called Feminists, What Were They Thinking? Which totally goes really well with these two books. The documentary is more on a serious note, so I wouldn't really put it as part of Garbagus. But I thought because my week ended up very much themed around feminism, it paired really well. So I also recommend that documentary. It's Feminists, What Were They Thinking? And then other movies I watched this week are also the Netflix documentary about Woodstock 99. There was Scary Movie, the first one, the one where they parody Scream. I think that's the first one. And then I watched Jaws 3, which is trash. You know what? I actually really like Jaws 3, which is kind of like, I feel bad for liking it because it takes place at SeaWorld, and for ethical purposes, I don't go to zoos or like aquariums and whatever. But like, I don't know, I just love that movie. Yeah, anyway. So that's been my week 1 recap for Garbagus. Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you guys are enjoying your reads for this month. Like this video if you did, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!